Let me introduce you to the most helpful tool for a web developer. And I'm talking about the Web Inspector. The Web Inspector is part of the browser's development tools or dev tools. And it's an amazing way to look behind the scene of every website. You're basically able to investigate how something has been created. And more importantly, you can debug your own work, figure out why something might not be working, or you can use it to experiment a little bit by changing your design right in your browser. I'm going to show you the Firefox Web Inspector, but Chrome, Safari, and Edge have similar tools, and they all kind of work the same way, and you can use the browser of your choosing. As an example, I'm going to use a small website that I coded a little while ago, which is a simple password creator. It's a super simple site. As you can see here, there are only a few elements on the page, and basically what this tool does is it creates random passwords. But the passwords are all phrases that have to do with animals, and then the letters of the phrase are randomly exchanged with special characters. So in the end, you can kind of still read the phrase, but it's obfuscated and worthy of a fairly secure password. There's some settings here. You can change the level of complexity from simple, where the replacing algorithm is really just upper and lower case, to medium, where numbers are introduced, then complex, and finally insane, where there are all kinds of crazy special characters. But anyway, let's look behind the scenes of this small web page. One thing I could do is look at the page source. I can right click on the background and say view page source, and I get a listing of all the HTML source code that was downloaded from the server. In here you can see there are some CSS files that are linked to, which I can click on and then see the CSS code, and I can get a general overview of what HTML is driving this page. But as I said earlier, the source code shows me only what was downloaded from the server and not how this document was since modified by JavaScript, let's say. And in this current example, it is JavaScript that creates the random passwords and outputs them on the page. If we look here in the HTML where the password is supposed to be inserted, it's this h1 tag, you can see that there's actually no content here, although on the page we clearly see a password. So viewing the source code of a web page is helpful only to a certain extent. The Web Inspector gives you a lot more information. So let me show you how to use that. I can again click on the background and then choose the last option here, Inspect Element. And that brings up a whole host of developer tools, which the inspector is part of. In the inspector, you see the HTML code on the left and information about the CSS on the right. So I can select elements on the left. Let's click on the body here. And on the right, I see the current CSS rules that are applied. I can see that the background color here is a light gray. I can see that there is a font family applied. I see that the text color is set to black. And I could even change these values or add new ones, which I will show you in a moment. But first, let me also point out that there is a few other options here. On the right, we can look at the layout, which basically shows me the margin, the border, the padding, and the height and the width of the currently selected element. If I select this reload element in my HTML, I can see on the right that it has a margin of 80 pixels to the top. That's the space that separates the reload icon from the password box. What else do we have? A computer tab that shows us all the properties that currently affect the selected element, and that includes properties that are inherited from any parent elements. There's also an animations tab that lets you inspect any CSS animations. And lastly, you can see information to any fonts on the page, including a listing of all typefaces that are being used. And you can see on this page there are two typefaces used, one called Overpass and the other one Overpass Mono. And then you can see there are additional tabs here on top of the developer tools, and those can help you to debug your JavaScript code or to see how the performance of your website is, or what cookies are being set, or how quickly elements are being downloaded from the server, etc., etc. The bottom line is that the developer tools are super powerful and really helpful for web development. And one of the most helpful parts for anyone beginning to learn HTML and CSS is the Web Inspector. So besides being able to just see what HTML and CSS make up a particular web page, you can even make adjustments on the fly. You can make quick manipulations right here in the browser, either to test out design ideas or to possibly see why something isn't quite working the way you want it to work. Let me show you an example. I'm going to select the body tag in the HTML pane here on the left. And as we saw earlier, there's a few properties here that are set. Now the background color is set to a light gray. If I click on that, I get a color picker and I can easily just change it. Right now it's a bright red color, and you can see in the code that the new value is actually updated here. So instead of having to go back and forth to my code editor to make a change and then refresh my browser window, I can make changes right in my browser, and that makes certain explorations just a little bit less cumbersome. Let me show you something else. I can click on this arrow symbol here on the top left, and that allows me to click on elements on the page, and they will then be selected in the HTML view. So I now selected the box where the password is being displayed, and I can scroll down here and see that there is a border applied. What if I wanted to adjust the design of that border a little bit? I can do that straight in my inspector here. I can increase the border width, or maybe try a dotted border, maybe even a different color. I'm not sure if this particular move made the design better, but you get the idea of what the possibilities are here. Of course, if you make a change that you would like to keep, you will have to copy and paste that back into your CSS document. Otherwise, the change will be lost the next time you refresh this document in your browser. Right? These changes obviously are only temporary since you're manipulating the code in the browser itself. One other thing I should point out is that you don't only have the ability to modify CSS code, you can even change the HTML code on the left. For example, if I wanted to change the label of the copy button, I can select it, and then here in the HTML pane, right-click and say Edit as HTML and change the label. So maybe it says Copy Me. And that change is now reflected in the design. I can even delete elements. If I want to delete that button, I can select and press delete. There, it's gone. If I want to delete the settings button, I could do this as well. So I hope you got a small glance at what power these tools actually put in the hands of a web developer. And I hope you'll try out the web developer tools of the browser of your choice and inspect a few websites and maybe even modify them and just get a feeling for the tool. Again, it's one of the most essential tools for a web developer.